In June of 1992, I was an unemployed magazine editor in Southern California, and with my wife, a fifth-generation Oregonian, I moved to Portland. And we drove over the Siskiyou Mountains, and there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Oregon," with the outline of the state, and I had the conscious thought, as if dropping a penny in a wishing well, if I could be the film critic of the Oregonian and write books, I would have it made. And 6 months later, I was contributing to the Oregonian, and I was under contract to write a book, and it made me think that I should have put in something specific about money, because they were apparently taking requests at that moment. I was under contract to write a biography of Jerry Lewis. And if that doesn't ring a bell, I can mention that Jerry Lewis was one of the biggest stars of the 20th century. At various times, he was the highest paid performer in films, in television, in nightclubs, and on Broadway. He had about 10 years with his partner, Dean Martin. They made 20 hit films together. For about 10 years after that, Jerry, on his own, made hit films. He directed. He became the first comedian of his generation to direct himself in movies, and quite good ones. The Nutty Professor, The Bellboy. He spent 50 to 60 years as the chairman of the National Muscular Dystrophy Association with the Labor Day Telethon. He's a real remarkable character, and in the last 30 years or so, he's still alive, he's in his 90s, he's been kind of this crossy old Vegas guy, slick and oily and mean, and you know, he was on the internet in December giving a hard time to a reporter from Variety. It's typical. Anyway, I wrote Jerry a letter and said, I'm your biographer and I'd like to meet you, and he called me up and we arranged that I would visit him in San Diego. He lives in Las Vegas, but he keeps a yacht in a harbor in San Diego, and that's where he wanted to meet me. So I flew down to Orange County, where I used to live, and got a car and went to San Diego. And Jerry and I hit it off. I spent 3 or 4 hours with him in the cabin of this boat, in a boat basin next to a hotel in San Diego. And I asked all kinds of questions, some very generic questions, letting him expound on comedy and on Hollywood. I had some very specific knowledge that I'd never seen in another book. I knew that Jerry had a cousin who was murdered and the crime was never solved. I knew that he had been robbed at the Plaza Hotel in the 60s of $20,000 in jewelry. So he was interested that I knew these things, and as we were talking, he came around the coffee table and got closer and closer to me until he was sitting right beside me, almost knee to knee, and he was reaching over, he touched the glass plastic on my watch, he fingered the luggage tags on my briefcase. It was kind of an intimate thing, and I said my goodbyes. I went back to Orange County, and people said to me, "Are you wearing cologne?" And I'm like, "I smell like Jerry Lewis." He has a lot of expensive cologne, and he was so near me that I had, acquired his spore. And I went back to Portland, and Jerry and I stayed in touch. We had several phone conversations. He would mail me, it's 1993, he would mail me clippings. He introduced me to people I'd want to interview, and I arranged to meet him again. And I had a dilemma in front of me. I had agreed with my publisher to write the true story of Jerry Lewis. But Jerry, I could see, saw me as the guy who was going to write the book that was going to justify his career to the world. And that wasn't the bargain I had made. So I decided that I was going to ask more difficult questions. I was going to ask about his marriages. I was going to ask about his breakup with Dean Martin. I was going to ask a variety of things. Fly down to Orange County, rent a car, driving to San Diego, 1993, there's no cup holders in cars yet, and I spill coffee all over myself on the freeway. I pull into like a Rite Aid or a gas station, I don't remember, and I buy shorts and a shirt and get back on the road. I make it in time to the yacht basin. And Jerry comes up to open the gate to let me in, and something is different. For the first time in our 5 hours, perhaps, of conversation, Jerry does the kid. The kid is what he calls the character whom he played in all those movies, with and without Dean Martin. And if you've never heard the kid, he sounds something like this, and this is exactly what Jerry said to me that morning. It's Shawn Levy, and he's getting dangerously close to me. I thought, oh, dangerously close, okay. I come through and he says, I gotta get you out of my hair today. I got a million things going on. I'm thinking, well, I've come 1,000 miles, but okay, you're a busy man. We sit down in the boat, and right away the tenor of his responses to my questions is different. This is not him responding to an aggressive line of questioning. This is him responding to my presence. His answers are curt and short. Like me, he has a terrible potty mouth, and he's really letting it go. He assures me at one point that both he and Frank Sinatra agree that the press are cunts and always have been. And I'm thinking, but present company excluded, right, Jerry? It's 10:30 in the morning, and he's having a beer, and it's just, the atmosphere is thick, and it's not friendly thick. It's cold and hard. And I look at the questions I've prepared, and I've got nothing easy on this sheet, and I ask a question about the day the clown cried. If you don't know what the day the clown cried is, in 1970-71, Jerry went to Sweden to direct himself in a film about a clown imprisoned in Auschwitz by the Nazis who is used by his captors to lead Jewish children into the ovens. I will repeat that. Jerry Lewis as a clown in a concentration camp leading children into the ovens. The film was never released. Jerry ran out of money while it was being made. The Swedish studio kept one copy of the film. Jerry owns another. It turns out that he never had the rights to the script. His producer had sort of lied to him and given him a property he didn't have the right to film. And there's one copy in the world that's at the Library of Congress, and apparently they're going to show it in 2025, and don't bother sleeping out for tickets. I don't think it's going to come off. But anyhow, I asked Jerry what it was like to pour so much into a project and have it never be seen. And he exploded. What do you think? What do you think? You got some fucking nerve asking a question like that. You know, you're an insensitive prick. And he starts going on. And this lasts several minutes. And I've never been in the Marines. I never played football at a university. My parents were reasonable people, except when I was asking for it. No one has ever spoken to me in this way, let alone a legend of comedy I grew up watching on television 4 feet away from me with a big red face. On and on, several minutes, finally he needs a breath, and I start to apologize. I can't even remember the content of my apology. I said something about, I work in the abstract, and I forget that there's a real person. Well, whatever I said, that was another go signal. You know, Frank Tashlin talked to me like this in 1958. I needed it, you need it too, and look at how you show up dressed. I had shocked. He goes on again, and you need a personality transplant. I apologize again. There's a third salvo, and this is the briefest one, and then he's spent. At which point he reaches over to my cassette recorder, again, 1993, hits stop, it's been recording this whole time, and he says, you can't have this, I'm gonna keep this. And I said, Jerry, that's got a couple of hours of my work on it. He says, well, you can't have that part. I'm gonna erase that and I'll send it back to you, which by the way, he did. But we said goodbye. It was clear that the interview was over, and we agreed to speak again, and I went out to the car, and I'm physically shaking. And there's no cell phones, 1993, so absent the possibility of talking to someone, I just take out a pad and I start writing down everything he said during this outburst. And I got most of it down. And the next day I was having lunch with an editor from a movie magazine, and this guy knew Jerry all along and grew up in Hollywood near Jerry, and said, oh, this is great. This is a great thing to have happened, because Jerry has 3 sets of teeth. And now you've seen them all, and when you go forward, you're going to be able to tell if this is a true story or not a true story, because you'll have seen both sides of him. And that was very good advice, and I did wind up spending 2.5 more years working on the book. And I thought it was only fair if I ended the book with an account of my work, my collaboration with Jerry, much like I have just told you. And the last chapter in the book is called J and I, with an ampersand, and it tells this story. And the book was received as a biography of Jerry Lewis. I suppose it did very well. I was fortunate. I chose a good subject. I had a sensational ending. And it had this reputation. I would, because I was the film critic of the Oregonian, I would meet people in the entertainment business. And over the years, people would say, "You are the guy Jerry threw off the boat." Steve Martin, Penn Jillette, Harry Shearer. One day, Tom Hanks told me that he had been out to dinner with Paul Reiser and Martin Short, and Marty Short spent the evening doing impressions of Jerry throwing me off the boat. And I'm like, this is great. But of course, that's not where Jay and I end. A few months after the book has come out, I get a FedEx at my home in Portland from Las Vegas. At the time, Jerry was touring the country in Damn Yankees, playing the Mr. Applegate, the Satan figure. And wherever he went, someone would raise a hand at a press conference and say, "Hey, a new biography," and Jerry would fume and sell out every copy in that town. And it was great. He was on book tour, not me. And I get this FedEx from Las Vegas where Jerry makes his home, and inside the FedEx is another FedEx from Pittsburgh to Las Vegas. And I open that, and inside that is a letter. It's a letter from a doctor in Omaha, Nebraska. And it says, "Dear Mr. Lewis, it was a pleasure meeting you and taking care of your wife when you passed through Omaha last month with Damn Yankees. I'm writing in reference to check number 8432 in the amount of $150 to let you know I am not going to cash this check, but I am going to have it framed and hung in my office as a memento of having met such a great entertainer and humanitarian, signed Dr. Starstruck Doctor." I immediately go to eBay and find Jerry Lewis autographs for $10. This doctor got taken, $150. But the thing that struck me the most was that attached to this letter is a handwritten letter from Jerry Lewis to me. "Dear Mr. Levy, isn't life interesting? How different people can have different impressions of one another. I am truly blessed. What have you accomplished? Signed, JL." Now I'm trying to picture the scene. Jerry is in a hotel in Pittsburgh, day after, day before a performance, and a letter comes from Omaha. And he reads this letter, and if you or I or any other normal person read this letter, they would have said, "That's nice." Maybe shown it to someone else, put it in a pile, recycled it, maybe find it again 10 years later. Jerry is sitting there, reads this letter, and thinks to himself, "That fucking Shawn Levy, I am going to show him." And he sends it to Vegas with instructions to forward it to me. I'm trying to wrap my head. I've spent years thinking about this man, and I'm still amazed at what he's capable of. This behavior seems so thin-skinned and petty and vengeful and mean and tiny, and I didn't have a name for it. But now I do. It's presidential.